Shaken baby syndrome. This is for prevention for high school students.
That's enough. That's enough. That's enough. That's enough. That's enough.
Poor Mia. Never shake a baby. All babies are going to cry. Crying is normal. They cry for many different reasons, and all babies will have times when they cannot stop crying. Babies cry most between the ages of 6 to 10 weeks old. It doesn't mean they won't cry before or after that, but during 6 to 10 weeks is usually when most babies cry the most. What is colic? Colic suggests intestinal distress. So often when people have colicky babies, the doctors will try to give you different formulas or different gas drops, something to help with distress in the intestines after feeding. A lot of times people are asking, is there something medically wrong with the baby? Is the baby in pain? Because it sounds like it. Does infant colic simply refer to a baby as a baby that cries a lot? You'll hear, oh, my baby's just colicky. And they're saying that their baby's crying a lot. The letters in purple stand for peak of crying. P stands for peak of crying. Your baby may cry more each week, the most in month 2, less in months 3 through 5. U stands for unexpected. Crying can come and go, and you don't know why the baby even started crying. R stands for resist soothing. Your baby may not stop crying no matter what you try. Rocking, swaying, nothing seems to help. P stands for pain-like face. A crying baby may look like they are in pain, even when they are not in pain. L stands for long-lasting. Crying can last as much as 5 hours a day or even more. E stands for evening. Your baby may cry more in the late afternoon and evening. Oftentimes they refer to that as their fussy time. The word period means that the crying has a beginning and an end. This is a picture of the same baby on the same day. You'll notice the baby on the left is very content and happy, and the baby on the right, same baby, looks like he's almost in pain, but he doesn't look happy. So you can see that all babies are going to cry. So what do I do to soothe an irritable baby? First of all, you want to feed your baby slowly so they don't get gassy. You also want to burp the baby often to get the gas out. Make baby as comfortable as possible. Do that by making sure you check to make sure that your baby's not too hot or too cold. Make sure their diaper is dry and clean. Provide a gentle motion or relaxing sound. So often today you can buy really nice fancy swings that even makes sounds and soothing motions. Is the baby hungry, thirsty, bored, anxious, or sleepy? You want to make sure that the baby doesn't need anything. But please understand that all babies have times when they cannot stop crying. It's just a fact. Babies are going to cry. There's also difficult stages. Night crying. When the babies are 7 to 8 months old, they often cry a little bit more at night. There's separation anxiety. Usually happens between 6 months and 3 years, where if they get separated from their mother or father, They have some anxiety. Exploratory behavior, that's difficult for toddlers. The no stage happens between 1 to 3 years old, where your baby is saying no, no, no all the time. Loss of appetite can happen sometimes between 18 months to 3 years. And then certainly toilet training, if they're not ready, can be a really difficult stage. A tired, frustrated caregiver and a crying baby can be a deadly combination, leading a parent or other caregiver to shake a baby in a moment of frustration. And that's what shaken baby is, usually a moment of frustration. So, what is shaken baby syndrome? It is a medical term used to describe the injuries that can result if a baby is violently shaken. Violent shaking is one of the most devastating forms of child abuse. You can see in the slide the head movement of a baby when it's being shaken. So you can see how the head moves forward and snaps backwards. And we all know that when we have babies, you always want to try to support that head and neck. And you can see right here, there's no support. You can see the violence during the shaking. Right here is a picture of the brain movement inside the skull. You can see that with the head moving back and forth so violently, the brain is moving front to back and there's nothing holding it. So it's moving against the inside of the skull. There are some signs here that a baby has been shaken, like broken bones, unusual crying, sleepiness, pale or bluish skin, vomiting or refusing to eat, not breathing, and unconsciousness. Poor baby. Sad. Okay, here are some risk factors for a victim. Most victims are under the age of 6 months old. Remember, that's also that time when they're crying, when most crying occurs. 60% are male. Doesn't mean that females are not victims of shaken baby syndrome, but 60% are males. There is also a greater demand for babies with care. For example, so if a baby has illnesses or prematurity or special needs of some kind, they're at higher risk for shaken baby syndrome. And it really just makes sense because of the special needs and the extra care that's needed. It can get really frustrating if the baby isn't calm, if it cries a lot. Dad's story here. This is a local story of Evan.
A little boy in West Allis is forever damaged because of what happened to him shortly after he was born.
New at 10, 12 News' Joyce Karbasiak joins us with a personal story of remorse and recovery.
Kathy Toya, it's a story that puts a face on a problem that's on the rise in southeastern Wisconsin.
Okay. Am I the good guys?
Yeah.
Though he's only 8, Evan Coleman has a pretty good idea of what he wants to be when he grows up.
Do news.
You want to do the news? Not reporting, but taking the pictures.
And the important thing to have a battery.
Interesting, because the pictures from his own life tell such a compelling story. Like this shot, taken the day before his life changed forever.
I did a horrible, unforgivable thing.
This is Evan's father, who wants his face hidden.
I'm obviously ashamed of it. Who wouldn't be?
Evan's dad was caring for him that day in 2001 when he says Evan's constant crying pushed him over the edge.
I lost it, and I picked him up, and I shook him, I think 2 or 3 times. Kind of tossed him into his crib, and that's when I think he hit his head on the railing of the crib. As soon as I did it, I couldn't believe, what had happened, what I had done.
He drove his son to Children's Hospital. Evan's mother, who had been at work, rushed to be with them.
I remember walking into the room, and Evan was laying there in a little bed, and his eyes were black and blue, and he had cuts all over his face. He looked like the life was pretty much sucked out of him. And I looked at him and I said, I will find who did this to you, and they will pay.
She didn't have to look far. While he denied it at first,
I was so ashamed of myself, I couldn't bring myself to say it.
within hours, Evan's dad confessed.
All of his ribs were fractured. He had fractured arms and fractured legs. So he literally was beaten from head to toe. This is a 3-month-old baby.
I was a pretty bad alcoholic at the time, and I had the temper to go with it.
Had you been drinking when it happened?
No, I was sober, which is why I couldn't believe, I was stone sober, and I had just done this to my son. I couldn't believe it.
Jenny couldn't believe that not only did Evan's dad do this to him, he apparently had hurt Evan before.
His arm fractures were healing injuries. There were some old rib fractures that were at least a month old.
Evan's father spent 7 years in prison. His son's sentence will last much longer.
He now has epilepsy. So he's been hospitalized 4 or 5 times for seizures. His behavior, his social skills, he's 8 years old, and his social skills are about 4-year-old level.
I'm a camera. Do all right? Say all right. All right.
Jenny says a portion of Evan's brain, the part that regulates reasoning and emotion, is permanently damaged. So Evan goes into rages and tantrums, and he's developmentally delayed.
I actually had to put him into a psychiatric hospital this year, and that was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do.
Many of these babies die. About a quarter of them die. About a third to a half of them who survive have devastating injuries.
Dr. Lynn Sheets says Children's Hospital last year saw 30 cases of abusive head trauma, a record. With 9 so far this year, there's fear that record will be broken.
When a baby's crying and you've met all of their needs, if you start feeling frustrated or angry or inadequate, walk away. Put the baby down safely and walk away.
Evan's dad got out of prison this past December.
I spent the majority of my incarceration depressed and absolutely hating myself for the things that I had done.
A court order prevents him from having contact with his son.
I hope that someday he can forgive me. I wouldn't expect him to. And I don't expect Jenny to, that's for sure.
But they both wanted to let people know what shaking a baby can do to a family and to a child.
He had so much potential, and a lot of that potential is gone because he's now disabled.
I just want people to know that it can happen to anyone, if you let the stress go on long enough. I don't want to see it happen to anyone else.
A moment's rage
Batter up. Batter up.
with a lifetime of consequences.
Yeah. Home?
Evan will be on medication for the rest of his life. Currently, his regimen is for seizures, attention deficit disorder, and psychiatric problems.
Does Evan realize what happened to him?
He does. About a year ago, his mother told him how he was hurt, and she says Evan is now afraid of his father. The court order separating them will stay in effect for 6 more years.
It's remarkable that they wanted to tell their story.
It is something, isn't it? Both believe that if the long-term consequences of shaking or abusing a baby are shared, people will think twice before letting their frustration get the best of them. As that doctor said, put the baby in a safe place, walk away, and call for help. Don't let that stress overwhelm you.
And it is important not to let that stress overwhelm you. So what are the long-term results? Well, just like the lady in the video said, even with prompt medical attention, many infants die. 1 out of 4 die. Those who survive may have lifelong medical conditions, like Evan, who has seizures, developmental disabilities, coordination problems, learning disabilities. Some also have deafness, paralysis, and blindness. Okay, so who would shake a baby? What, really anyone. Anyone that's stressed out, frustrated, doesn't know how to cope. So what are the people that are more at risk? Well, young parents, people late in their teens and early 20s who don't have that experience. Males are at a higher risk. People that have inexperience with babies. People with other risk factors like using drugs and alcohol, mental illness, stress, or a lack of self-control. Those people can all be a little bit more at risk. Please remember the rule of 10. And like the lady in the video, she mentioned a little bit about this. If your baby is crying, lay the baby on his back in his crib or in another safe place. Stay 10 feet or more away. Slowly count to 10 or take 10 deep breaths to calm yourself down. After 10 minutes, check on the baby, make sure he's safe, everything's okay, and repeat if necessary. If you still feel stressed out, call someone for help. It is okay to ask for help. Have phone numbers of people who can help you. Keep them by the phone. Someone you can call to come over right away, like a family member or a friend or a neighbor. Call the baby's doctor or nurse helpline. But there's also local community resources, but you have to call for help. Take the pledge today that you will never harm a baby and pass that message on.